Hi everyone, I'm Nina, and today I figured I want to talk about why I learned the 5 languages that I'm speaking on various levels. And yeah, those languages are basically German, my mother tongue, English, French, Portuguese, and Chinese Mandarin. And basically, I started to get into languages like most people here in Switzerland. I was forced to start with French, as my native language is German. That's like the standard, and it started in primary school. And I have just really negative associations with, those lessons. I was always really bad at it, and I always wrote really bad grades. I didn't like the teachers, and so then I basically just thought that I'm not good at it. Actually, even in my mother tongue, it took me quite a while to talk fluently, like with whole good sentences, because I have a hearing problem on my left side. I got it fixed somewhat. So anyhow, in the end, my parents noticed that I'm not learning the language as fast as I'm supposed to. They tried to teach me my mom's mother tongue, Macedonian, but since my German was even not progressing as it should, they gave up on that, because with people that have hearing issues, it's just recommended to then focus on one language while growing up. I still think it's a pity, but there's nothing to do about it. So I started to improve my German once I went to school and once I went into reading. And I think that really reflects well how I'm learning today my other languages. We all have different learning types. And I'm a very visual person. I'm not so much picking up on things when I just hear them. So I got English classes when I was like 11 for a few years, but those also didn't progress well. I also basically sucked at it in school. But then at 17, I had a chance to have a language exchange. I went to Canada for 7 months. It was meant to be 10 months, but it didn't end up being the experience that I was hoping that it will be. I went to Canada, to a really like small place in BC, and it was just, I had like a real culture shock, let's say that. And I didn't expect it at 17, because I figured we all watch TVs and shows, and we know high schools from media, so I figured that I know what I'm getting into, but I didn't. And so that's how I basically became fluent in English pretty fast. I think I saw most progress within the first 4 months. And then after 7 months, I really disliked it so much there that I was like, hey, I'm really content with the level I reached. And it was my goal to go to learn the language. So I was in a bad place emotionally and went home early. And they've told me that I would probably regret it, but I'm really happy with that decision. But I'm so grateful that I got that experience of learning a language through immersion. So if I can go bad like that, I still recommend it to anyone who has the chance to. So that basically nails down my first foreign language. And so later on, I ended up in a relationship, and my boyfriend at the time left to go to China out of the blue, basically, short after I came back from my Canada trip, and decided to go into a Kung Fu program for a long time. And it was I was like really young still and in love. So of course I went to visit him. We were doing the long distance thing, and on my first visit in China, I expected a culture shock this time because he is so different. And as a teenager, it even came up that I could learn English in some place of China. Don't ask me where. And I was like, no, I could never live there. So ironically, I ended up in China and I fell in love with the country, the culture, the food from the moment I stepped on the ground at the airport. And so I just decided, after I was there in the Kung Fu school as a visitor for a little over a week maybe, it was a really short trip, that I also want to go there in the following year. And that's why I started to sign up for basic Chinese group class. That also didn't bring me really far, but I just got a little bit used to the language, you can say. I ended up 1 year in China there, and I was surrounded by foreigners and English-speaking Chinese coaches. So unfortunately, it wasn't a countryside. There wasn't clubs or bars or even a coffee to sit down and socialize easily with the locals. I had no idea at that point where I could just go and meet people my age with my really, really basic Chinese. So unfortunately, I didn't progress a lot in that year that I was there. And I came back home and I tried to refresh the French that I never succeeded at. And then it basically continued with me stopping to continue my Chinese studies when I went back home. And I kind of regret that I couldn't push through, but it was about the time that I went into a career and started sports, and so life happens. It happens. I even wanted to learn some Portuguese back then because of my ex, who was from Portugal. But since the relationship didn't work out and we separated, I figured it's not the best time to study the language that reminds me of that separation that was still fresh. So I gave up on that idea after just a few trial lessons, despite really liking the language already then, when I always heard it, how they spoke it in the family. I thought it's really beautiful. But it kind of always was in my mind that it would be really nice to speak Portuguese. So fast forward, I ended up returning many times to China. And the last time was actually last year, when I went to Beijing for 7 months, and then I went to the south for 1 month into a language school. That was amazing. In Beijing, I basically tried to date some locals, and it was really cool to just text, and we practiced my reading and writing skills on a phone like that, and just pick up on how people really talk instead of just book Chinese, basically. But the coaches were used to working with foreigners, even though they didn't speak well English. So they simplified everything a lot all the time, even while I told them to just speak normally to me, because that's the only way how I could progress. But they would just be like, oh, this, that, down, up, and not using proper sentences. So that was also a pity. And I put in a lot of effort to try to make friends. I went out a lot. But many times it just still was hard to make true connections with people in Beijing. I made some Chinese friends that spoke English, but yeah, so I made some acquaintances, but it's just not the same. And I had my dates sometimes, but also just on a superficial level. And then when I went to the south into the language school, it was an amazing experience. I ended up in a school that sets you together with a local who's learning English. So basically the idea is you can even apply for a language partner that is assigned to you And I got that, but she basically just wanted to study as if I'm her English teacher outside of the classes that we already booked. And I was like, that's literally not the idea of a language partner. A language partner is someone that you befriend and you acquire the language while doing some fun activities together. So we didn't click, but my roommate was amazing. I'm still in touch with her sometimes. And she invited me to come visit her in her hometown when I come back. And we improved our language skills together so much. Like, it would be a natural flow between English and Chinese, so we could both like learn. I would start talking to her in Chinese until maybe I could not think of something how to express it in Chinese. And then I would just continue in English because she's learning English too. So after a while, she will like respond to me in English until she also gets lost and doesn't know how to really explain something, and she changed back into Chinese, and we would be back in her mother tongue. So it was a really cool natural flow instead of having to be like, oh, we're gonna do 1 hour of Chinese and 1 hour of English so that it's equal or something. No, it was just like a true friendship, you know. So that was like the month where I progressed my Chinese the most, I think. In the end, I came home and in that time, I was just telling myself to not watch any English movies, series, whatever, and just use Chinese media the whole time that I was in Beijing, actually. So I think that helped too, but not as much as that language exchange in the very last month. And so I came back home and I started to use spaced repetition systems with flashcards that I wrote down with HXK lists. And I tried to keep pushing myself also with the watching only Chinese content until I finally felt like I kind of just burned out because I tried so hard for such a long time at this point, and also kept up with the writing and reading system and not just talking, which makes a big difference, I think. Just because I learned so much through reading, I figured I need to get to the level where I can actually pick up a book. And I actually did, but I never finished it, I have to admit still. And so, yeah, I went back, continued until I was like, I cannot remember new vocabulary anymore. It was just, I was like through, the energy was through. And I was like, okay, it's okay. You're now at the sociable level. I wouldn't call it properly fluent yet, but on a level where I can talk about various fun things with a friend, if it's one-on-one, but maybe I would still get lost if like Chinese people talk together. Oh gosh, that was just someone calling. I really wanted to put it all in one take, but whatever. So yeah, I was just saying, basically, I just accepted how it is. I wasn't on the level that I wanted to be, but I was at a level where I felt content that if I'm gonna put a break now and I get back at it later, I will not lose that much and feel like, oh my god, I just lost it, basically. So I didn't really study Chinese in the whole last year, and it's that in January I ended up visiting someone in Brazil that I met in China. And after I just learned 3 words there, because I was like, if you go to a country, you need to pick up at least some basic words. So my 3 first words I learned in Portuguese were banheiro, which is like bathroom, and I still pronounce it wrong, I think. Trapaceiro, which is like cheater, and mentiroso. And everyone would ask me like, why did you learn these words? Like, what the hell? So I was like, oh yeah, so I'm with him here, my friend, and you know, and then his friends would all be like, oh, okay, I know, because he's like the biggest cheater there is. Like, whenever we play a game, he will just do whatever is, yeah, in his favor. And I figured I really need the word toilet because once I was in China in a taxi and I literally needed him to make a stop on a 5-hour ride so I can go to the toilet, and I didn't know how because I didn't have like a dictionary yet on my phone where I can just like look it up online. So I was just like, oh my god. So since then I figured that the word for toilet is one of the first words I need to know in any language. So it started like that, and then I came back home. I started dating that guy with the long distance thing, and I just figured, hey, now I basically am on hold with the Chinese thing. I still want to push my French now again, that I want to have like something new, and I want to really get it finally on a level where it's okay, because it's such a waste to have studied it for 8 years in school and still not be able to just ask for the way. So I got into that a little bit more, but then I just started to learn Portuguese and surprise him after like 4 months of studying by May. And that's basically the video that you see on this channel. I'm gonna link it somewhere. I need to still figure out how that works. But yeah, so that's how we end up here with my 5 languages on different levels. And yeah, so I hope that you're gonna be tuned in for the next one. Still gotta see in what language that will be, but baby show kisses. See you then.